What up, guys? James from Bolt Bros here. Want to talk about Brandon Staley and kind of where his career has been thus far as a head coach and what his record looks like and what teams he really beat. Are they good teams or are they bad teams based upon what his record up to this point as a head coach for the Chargers? So let's get into it, guys. Bolt Bros, let's go.
I'm Dale Henley. You watching the Bolt Bros podcast? Let's do it!
So a lot to think about after that Cowboys loss on Monday night. It's a lot to be able to unpack as a coaching staff. And I mean, we as a podcast here are generally pretty kind to this guy right here, Brandon Staley. You know, the thing about it is like Brandon Staley has made a lot of questionable decisions, and those questionable decisions tend to go his direction. Now, he is one of those guys that I'll say is a risk taker in comparison to a lot of other coaches out there. You know, a lot of people don't like that he's taking risks, but hey, let's go back to Anthony Lynn. He didn't take risks, and it got him out of basically a job with the Chargers. It's a hard line to figure out which is the right way to do it. I don't know, but basically, like I'm going to talk about just what Brandon Staley's record is currently as a head coach and really break down the teams that we beat in his career and the teams that we have lost to in his career and base them upon their winning records or losing records on that season, calling them bad or good teams. So it's kind of a bigger presentation on what this is all about. But let me just go ahead and jump into it here for you guys. So this is the 2021 season when he initially got hired in. Obviously the Washington football team at that time started out his career with a win. That was a big win to start out playing out in Washington. Big win all around. Once again, that is a win against a bad team. Next week, come home, lose to the Dallas Cowboys, which was a good team. Ironically, same score at SoFi Stadium 2017, just like the Monday night game. So Cowboys were 12-5 at that time. Next week, you had the Chiefs at 12-5. It was a good team. We ended up getting a win. I mean, at that point, as Charger fans, we're like, we got a guy that's got us at 2-1, and we beat the Chiefs. Wow, this is going to be great. This coach is going to be phenomenal. Brandon Staley's our guy right now. Next week, he ends up beating the Raiders, who ended up the season as 10-7, which I consider that as a good team. Got to the playoffs and got that dub. So hey, we're looking good. 3-1 so far. Browns next week, bad team. So he beat the Browns. That ended at 8-9 for the season, which was a bad team. But hey, we're looking good, right? 4-1 at that point. And then we ended up taking a loss from the Ravens, who ended the season 8-9. That was that whole Lamar Jackson drama happening within that team at that time. Took an L on that one, so he lost to another bad team. Then the Patriots, 10-7, lost to a good team at that point. I mean, Bill Belichick seems to always find a way to beat us regardless. And then the Eagles coming back to beat a good team who did go to the playoffs at 9-8. So we kind of had this good rotation of getting past a lot of good teams and teams that have winning records that season. But as we continue going through the season, after the Eagles game, lost to the Vikings, an 8-9 team, which is considered as a bad team. Steelers 7-9-1. We beat them, and I consider them as a good team because they did have a chance to get to the playoffs. I think they might have got to the playoffs. I think that was Ben Roethlisberger's last season. And then the Broncos, we took an L against the Broncos, who was a 7-10 season for them, and then came back, beat the Bengals, who were 10-7 and division winners, ended up getting a W out of that one. So we beat another good team. And then came back and beat the Giants, which you should at that time have a 4-13 record. You should beat the Giants, and we did. And we beat that bad team. Chiefs, we ended up getting a loss, so we split the series with them that season. Chiefs are obviously 12-5. We had a overtime loss in that game. I remember that one very, very distinctly. Now, this one is the one that changed the entire season for 2021 for us. And this is kind of a coaching nightmare. I remember it's COVID year. I remember there was a lot of issues with a lot of people being sick during this game. We took an L to the Texans, went 4-13 that year. I mean, that was an unexcusable loss. That changed that whole season to be able to get to the playoffs based upon that loss. That is a coaching issue at that point. I get it. It was COVID. I get it. But that was a critical loss for that time of the season. The following week, we ended up playing the Broncos 7-10. So we split the series with them, got a W out of that one, and ended the season against the Raiders, 10-7 Raiders, for a loss that kicked us out of the playoffs. So the one thing I'm looking at this is that we had 4 losses to good teams, 4 losses to bad teams, beating 5 good teams and losing to 3 good teams. So basically his record that year was 5-4 versus good teams, 4-4 versus bad teams, which ended our season at 9-8. It's a tough thing because, you know, you look at that season and you say, okay, hey, he was 5-4 versus good teams. That's great. You want to be able to see that you could find a way to close out to some of these better teams in the NFL, finding ways to beat them and such. But we did go 4-4 versus bad teams. We just were 1 game over 500. It's a little bit of a tough thing. Once again, I'm going to point on that whole season. That Texans game was brutal for us. That's what shifted that whole year. Coaching mattered at that point. Even though you have a lot of guys that are out, coaching mattered. You got to adjust correctly to be able to beat those teams you should beat. And that game was absolutely frustrating. I remember watching that with all my Bolt bros, Andrew and Kyle. It was frustrating to watch. So moving on to 2022 season. I know this could get kind of long a little bit on this, guys, but hopefully you guys are going to follow what I'm saying here. So started out the season with a W against a bad team, the Raiders, 6-11 team that ended the season that way. Followed up the next week with Chiefs, 14-3. Got that loss there against a good team, Jaguars, 9-8, which weren't the best of team at that time, but we did have a lot of injuries in that game. No excuses. They were a 9-8 team, division winning team. Got the L on that one, and that was a good team. Following week, we finally got a revenge game against the Texans, which was a 3-13 team, how they ended the season. We got that W once again against a bad team. Browns following week, 7-10 was their ending record for the season. Got the W against a bad team. Then the next week, we beat the Broncos, who were a 5-12 team in overtime. I remember with the Dustin Hopkins field goal, Andrew and I and Kyle were at that game. Fun game all around. And then the following week, we ended up getting smoked by the Seahawks, 9-8 Seahawks at that time, or to end the season, and got the loss. So another loss to a good team. Falcons the next week. That one was a toss-up because we both found ways to try to give up the game. 7-10 Falcons that ended the season that way, and we got the W on against a bad team. And then this is where the other things start kind of breaking up. Niners, 13-4 team that ended up going very far in the playoffs. Ended up getting a loss against a good team following week. We ended up losing to the Chiefs, 14-3 Chiefs. So we lost to another good team. Cardinals, 4-13, got a W on them against a bad team, barely, just because we ended up doing a 2-point conversion to basically go up late in the game. And then the Dolphins, we ended up taking an L against them, a 6-11 Raiders team, and lost to another bad team. Now, Dolphins, 9-8 W. This is where we had the run to be able to get to the playoffs. Dolphins was the good team that we ended up beating at 9-8. Titans, 7-10. We ended up beating them, or they were ended the season at 7-10. We ended up beating them and was a very bad team at that time. They were definitely in a downwards trajectory at that point. Colts, 4-12. That was a mess all around, but that's the game that ended up allowing us to be able to go to the playoffs and lock in our playoff spot. So we beat a bad team, a 4-12 Colts team, 4-13, I believe it was. Colts team, not good. Jeff Saturday situation there. It was a mess for their organization at the time. And then the following week, beat the Rams that were a 5-12 Rams team. We ended up beating another bad team at that point, and we ended up losing to the Broncos, which was a bad team at 5-12 at that point after that win. So if we do include, say, the Jaguars loss in the playoffs, that's losing to another good team. I'm not really going to try to truly include that at that point, but this is the whole breakdown for the season for the 10-7 Chargers of 2022. We were 1-5 versus good teams. If we add the Jaguar game, we were 1-6 versus good teams. The point I'm trying to put here, guys, is that we're not finding ways to be able to get that level of trying to find a way to beat the good teams. You have got to beat the good teams to be able to take a step or a leap ahead with your team, especially in the playoffs. It's do or die, win or go home. You need to find a way to be able to beat those teams. You're going to only be able to find a way to be able to get to the playoffs if, and I should say, get through the playoffs to a Super Bowl if you could beat the best of the best. And that's the frustrating part of this, that we can't see that consecutive ability to be able to close games out. And we always find ways just to be able to barely lose games against these good teams. That's the frustrating part. Last year, we were 9-2 versus bad teams. Geez, like, we were great against the bad teams. You should be beating them and finding ways to do it. We're doing that. We're just losing to the good teams. That's our struggle here, guys. That is the thing that I'm saying. Is it coaching that's just not finding a way to close out games, or it's the players that aren't closing out the games? Hot topic. I'm just reviewing Brandon Staley's record right now, and I'm more interested to know what your guys' thoughts are on this. Now, at this point, you going back to last year, we were 5-4 in 2021 versus good teams, 4-4 versus bad teams, 9-8. But last year we ended up going 10-7. We only beat one good team all season, which was the Dolphins. And that was just a really, really anomaly kind of based loss. And they looked extremely lost in that game for some reason. But we had a great defensive scheme that really just threw off Tua and their whole team. But we only beat one team, one good team last year that ended it with a winning record for us. And then 9-2 versus bad teams, and ended up going 10-7, ended up losing to the Jaguars in the playoffs. Now, going ahead to the 2023 schedule, we only have a couple weeks in now. But right now, look at it. Dolphins, we end up losing to them. They're a cream of the crop of the NFL at this point. So they're a good team. We end up taking an L. Titans lost to a bad team right now. If we're basing upon the records today, when this recording is happening, we lost to a bad team. Then we beat the Vikings. We won. We got a victory over a bad team. And then we ended up finding a way to get a win over the Raiders, who are now sitting at a 500 record this moment when I'm recording this. And then we ended up finding a way to lose to the Cowboys, which is a good team. So at the moment in 2023 season, we have lost to two of the three good teams that we played, the Dolphins, Raiders, and the Cowboys. So we were 1-2 versus good teams and 1-1 versus bad teams. This is what I'm trying to put towards this whole entire video, guys. We're not closing out games, and we're not finding a way to be able to win the games that really elevate your season, elevate your team, give more confidence to your team. Is it a coaching situation? I'm pretty positive, based upon the comments you'll throw down in the video, it's probably a coaching situation here. Situational coaching is necessary to be able to win games. And even to say that Cowboys game on Monday night, it was like not very well coached for both sides of the ball, for both teams. But it was just about finding that one little drive to be able to just end the game. And the Cowboys found that one drive late in the game to be able to get up and find a way to get a touchdown or a field goal to basically go up 3 points late in the game. We just weren't able to execute on our 2-minute drill at that point, and it just looked like a absolute mess. So I'm just going to wrap this video up a little bit more with this last slide. So Brandon Staley record versus good teams and bad teams, and good teams meaning as in winning records at the end of the season versus bad teams at the end of the season. So Brandon Staley's coaching career is 21-18. His total record currently for that record that he has. We are 14-7 against bad teams. We're a full 7 games above 500 against bad teams, but good teams 7-11. That is not good. And it seems like it's not getting any better at this point. So what I'm basically just trying to point out to you guys is the trajectory seems like it's going in a downward trajectory. It's going downwards. It's not going into a point where it's positive. Now, it's not easy to beat the good teams. The good teams find ways to win games. And right now, we're just not finding ways to beat the good teams. We do a good job of staying in the game. We don't find the ability to close out the games. Now, is that a Brandon Staley thing? Or is it the players that are just not executing correctly? It's a hard line and very fine to understand exactly what is not working with this team. And I'm just going to say, I want to hear what your guys' thoughts is. Is it Brandon Staley? Is it Kellen Moore? Is it the players? I don't know. I'm just going to base on Brandon Staley's career right now. It's not looking good based upon the teams that you need to win and beat to be able to get your team to that next level. 7-11 record right now for his, 39 games that he's played as a head coach. That's not a good record. I didn't look at any other coaches in the NFL to see what their record is, but I would imagine if you look at, say, Andy Reid, he's beat a lot of good teams. And it's just common, and it's very, very known because he's a very, very good coach. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this. This is just something that's been on my mind, that we have not found a way to be able to get past that point of just doing that little extra things to be able to close games out. We've been slumping very hard in that level of trying to beat those good teams to elevate this team and get them to another level. So I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this in the comments below. Please throw out your thoughts, questions, what this team needs to do to be able to find a way to be able to get it to another level. Is it the players? Who knows? But either which way, guys, want to hear your guys' thoughts. Once again, appreciate all your support. And once again, like the video. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, please do. We appreciate all your support, guys. So once again, this is James from Bolt Bros. Let's go.